You are listening to the Free to Be Mindful podcast, which invites you along on a journey to learn of mindful living, grow in mental health, and inspire through personal growth. In a world where we can often feel much stress and overwhelm, this podcast provides bite-sized tips and real talk conversations, empowering you to embrace mindfulness and nurture your full potential. I'm your host, Vanessa De Jesus Guzman, licensed therapist, retired educator, entrepreneur, and mom of two. I'm passionate about helping busy moms reduce the overwhelm and to live life intentionally without losing their, well, here we go. Hello and welcome back to the Free to Be Mindful podcast. I hope that you're feeling good, looking good, and doing better in this world than you were yesterday. So today I have the pleasure of interviewing Sara Diaz, who is known for being the First-Gen Madrina. And this episode is appropriately coming out because just on November 8th, we celebrated First-Gen Day. Now, before sharing about Sara, I want to share with you that First-Gen Day is celebrated on November 8th each year to commemorate the signing of the Higher Education Act of 1965. This day is really meant to honor students, faculty, and staff who are the first in their family to pursue a four-year undergraduate degree in the United States. And that happens to be the population that Sara works with the most. She is a social worker and life and transition coach and serves as the visionary founder and chief madrina, which means godmother, by the way, at the First-Gen Madrina LLC. Throughout her career, Sara has steered many workshops covering themes like transitioning to college, effective mental health management, imposter syndrome, time management, and so much more. Her expertise also extends to consulting on the development of leadership development curricula tailored to the needs of first-gen college students. And she has also contributed so much to the training and supervising of social workers to become more culturally responsive in their approach with their work with the Latinx community. Sara holds a master's degree in social work from Rutgers University, and despite living in the same place, she shares in the same apartment in New Jersey, she recently picked up her bags and moved to Florida. I'm really excited for you to learn more about Sara's interesting story and about the work that she does with first-gen individuals, which you can also hear more of on her podcast, the First-Gen Madrina podcast. Here we go. Hi, Sara. Thank you so much for being on the Free to Be Mindful podcast today.
Vanessa, thank you so much. I feel like this has been a long time coming, so it's really an honor to be on your podcast.
Thank you. Yes, so we run in the same circles and definitely the same circles on social media. So I'm so glad to have you on. I can't wait for everyone to hear about your podcast, about your services, and about your passion, which I also happen to land in. But before we get to any of that, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself with our listeners and watchers.
Awesome. So, hello, everyone. My name is Sara Diaz. I am a first-generation Cuban American. My parents were both born in Cuba, and I was the first to be born in the United States. I was born and raised in Hudson County, New Jersey, and recently, as of last year, took the leap of faith to move down to Florida, which has been quite a journey, but really excited to be here. And I'm also the first in my family to graduate college. And I ended up getting my master's degree in social work. And as a lot of us first gens do, climbed the ladder, became a licensed clinical social worker, and thought to myself, now what? Right?
Now
Like
what?
there's a lot of times that we have that experience. And after being in the traditional social work field for almost 10 years in child welfare, I decided to make a pivot and follow my passion, which is working with the first generation community. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I started my own business called the First-Gen Madrina. And I say that I'm living out my dream. I'm living out my purpose. So I'm so excited to be able to share more information with your audience.
I love it. And we have so many things in alignment. So I just want to share with everybody. So
Mm-hmm.
although I'm not Cuban, my family's from Dominican Republic, but the same first
Okay.
generation here. I was born here. My family came from Dominican Republic in their late teens, early 20s, first to graduate college, also grew up in Hudson County. However,
Woo!
I don't think I'll ever move to Florida because it's a little bit of a slower pace compared to Hudson County,
It
which, by the way,
is.
for those who are listening outside of New Jersey, I consider Hudson County to be like the sixth borough of New York City because we have that
Basically,
hustle and
yes.
bustle flow, but our view is nicer because we have the New York City skyline as our background. So, do you miss
Yes.
the background? Do you miss the New York City hustle and bustle? And how are you liking Florida?
So I actually was born and raised in a town called West New York.
There you go.
So basically the sixth borough, right? People always thought that I lived in New York. I do miss it. I actually lived on the main boulevard that overlooks New York City. So my
Mm-hmm.
background was the New York City skyline. So time to time I do miss it. I actually moved to Florida for a slower pace.
Okay.
I was craving that after the pandemic. I was, craving that slow down, was craving that quality of life. And I feel like I got that here. Is it my forever home? Maybe not. I'm not sure. I do miss my family, first and foremost. So if I do move back, it will be for them. But Florida is where I need to be right now. So I encourage everyone who is thinking about making that change, that switch in their life. If it aligns with where you're at the moment, do it. Like the worst that can
Yes.
happen is you go back, and that's not even the worst case. So, yeah, it's
Yes.
where I
And
need to be.
definitely. I'm so happy that you mentioned those things because it aligns with mindfulness a lot, which we're going to get to a little bit later on in the
Yes.
episode. But knowing where you need to be, having that awareness, wanting a little bit of a slower pace because West New York, Hudson County,
Mm-hmm.
all of this area, it is go, 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 and sometimes can suck the life out of you. So you have to be really intentional on the way that you slow down and on the way that you're present. So we'll definitely go back to that. But going back to
Mm-hmm.
your background, you said First-Gen Madrina is your platform. So we want to define a little
Mm-hmm.
bit for those folks who don't speak Spanish. So Madrina means godmother in Spanish. So First-Gen
Mm-hmm.
Madrina, where did you come up with that name? And then we'll delve
Mm-hmm.
into what does First-Gen even mean?
So the it was hard to think of what my business name would be, but I am so attached to this identity of being a first gen that I
Mm,
started to think back of who did I want to represent to others? Who did I want to be? What kind of figure? And in I did some volunteer work as I was transitioning to my business with first gen college students. And they would be the ones to come up to me and say, Sarah, I know you're a social worker. I know I need support. My family doesn't believe in mental health. Where do I
mm,
go? How do I get access to these resources? And I sort of started to see myself being either that big sister feel or maybe that godmother feel.
yeah.
And to me, it's really important to be that person that I wish I had when I was in college. The one that, although I couldn't talk to my family about what I was experiencing, I had that go-to person that I knew that I can trust and that would be able to support me. So that's the representation that I hope to be in the most humble way possible, to be that godmother figure for a first gen on their journey.
I love that explanation of it all. And thinking about my madrina, who's no longer with us in human form, but she was
Mhm.
definitely that person to provide that guidance and that I can turn to whenever I didn't feel comfortable or whatever it was. Talking to my parents, I would turn to her. So I love that representation of it all. And first gens really need this guidance because identifying as a first gen myself, my mom and dad didn't go to college and they didn't live in the United States and
Mhm.
they didn't set up a trust fund and have all of these network and connections and they don't know what a FAFSA
Yeah.
is and they don't know
Oh
how
yeah.
going to school for one thing and like having a career in education as I've had for 18 years and then saying now I want to start my own business and not have tenure or the pension or all
Mm.
of that and sometimes the fear that comes along with that because they work so hard to become stable or to live a stable lifestyle and then to do something different. I definitely identify with the pivoting as you did from one thing to another. So that everybody is on the same page, how would you identify first gen? Because so many people can categorize it as a couple of different things.
Yes, so I just want to say first that I align a lot with what you were saying about the stability piece, right? Of like the transition. I had my family thought that I was crazy. They were like, "But you have a master's, you have a license,
Right.
you have a stable job. Why would you want, to shake any or ruffle any feathers?" And
Hmm.
to me, I understand that it's because it's a result of their own fear being refugees in this country and having to leave their home behind, having everything taken away from them in a communist country. They thrive in stability and they want that for us. So
Hmm.
we want to keep in mind that we understand, that part of it, but we shouldn't let that stop us from really achieving our dreams. And to go back to your question, the term first gen or the definition is a little confusing because it can be taken differently depending on the context. So there actually is no one universal definition for first gen, which can get a
Mm.
little confusing. I'll share a few with you, the most common ones. So really, we most importantly hear the term first gen when we're thinking about college. The Department of Education has allocated a specific definition for first gen, and that's just because they provide a lot of funding for first gen students to colleges and universities. So that definition would be the first in your immediate family to attend college in the United States. That would be a first gen college student or first gen graduate.
Makes
Now,
sense.
I also consider myself, like you said, to be a first gen Cuban American because I was the first to be born in the US. That is another way that we hear the term first gen often. With the first gen Madrina, I thought it was important for me to kind of establish my own definition. And to me, being a first gen means you are the first to enter into a new space. So that could be the first to go to college, as no one else in your family did. You can be the first to become an entrepreneur, the first to move away from home, the first to break intergenerational cycles or go to therapy for the first time. So I like to open up the definition because we exclude a lot of people that really fit in and are part of our community by just saying the first to graduate college. So that has allowed me to meet so many amazing members of my community that align so well with the same feelings and challenges that I experience. And that's why it's important for me to open up the definition. So you may be a first gen in many different ways. And it's interesting to see how many people start identifying that once they hear the definition.
Yeah, I see like the check boxes being the boxes being checked off as
Yes.
you went through that
Yes.
definition. And I love that you open it up because so many people are looking for a sense of belonging, but also identifying. And when you
Oh, yeah.
don't identify, let's say, with friends or with family in that sense, it's really good to find a community, a space where you're like, no, wait, that's me. And then I love what you do
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many more services and resources that go along with that. So as you were saying, you have your LCSW, have your master's, worked in the field, and then establish your own platform. So explain a little bit what you do as a first gen madrina for folks who want to work with you.
Yes, thank you so much for that question. So initially, the First Gen Madrina started off, or really stemmed from the work I was doing with the college students and realizing that there was a gap and a lot of support that was still needed for college students. There are counseling centers on campuses, but a lot of them are at capacity, have long wait lists. So I figured why not use my expertise and my background in mental health to build more programming in colleges and universities. So I
Mm.
do a lot of workshops. I implement mentorship programs. I do a lot of curriculum work, consulting work, just to make sure that we are really supporting our students, especially after the pandemic, where we saw a lot of, the dropout rates increase.
Right.
So that's where the First Gen Madrina started, was me really wanting to get into colleges and universities. But then as I started to identify, more of myself and who I was as a first gen, I realized that, remember going back to what I said, now what after college? We don't stop being a first gen when we
Right.
graduate. We enter into what I call a lifetime of firsts. I was experiencing a lot of things after graduation as the first in my family, and I realized that there weren't a lot of support for professionals. So, with that, adapted the second pillar of my business, which is providing life and transition coaching to first gen professionals that felt very limited. Sometimes our culture puts up limitations for
Yeah.
us. Sometimes we put up limitations for ourselves, and we don't think we have the capability and the possibility to do the things that we want to do the things that bring us purpose and joy. And after I started doing that for myself, I developed a curriculum for a coaching program to be able to help first gen professionals to be able to do the same. So that is the second part, the second backbone really of the business, is to be able to support first gen professionals as well. And it has been an amazing journey so far.
Such a beautiful thing, and it resonates with me so much. And the thing that I think of the most is how a lot of us who have experienced this first gen journey, not just through college, but as you stated throughout, it becomes so much a part of our identity, sometimes for worse, but
Mm-hmm.
most times for better, because then we are willing to really pour our hearts and help other people so that things are a little bit easier, right? So that hopefully through generations, people don't have to go through as much of the hardships that perhaps we went through. And
Exactly.
I love how you really almost really open up the funnel to mental health, right? Mental health type of
Mm-hmm.
issues. And that's what I do with my platform of Amiga Moms is it's not mental health, but it's providing education, providing resources, providing moms a space in order to experience things that perhaps they haven't experienced within their culture or talk about how to balance both cultures. And also reminds me of
Mm-hmm.
my business, the Latinx Practice Collective, that it's specific for Latinx private practice therapists that are opening and going into that field, since a lot of them don't have family members who have done that. And it's again
Mm-hmm.
providing that support because we have this commonality, and sometimes other people don't get the experiences that we've been through. And as you said, a lot of things shape our mindset, the way that we look at the world and the way that we experience things, which makes me think of mindful living, which makes me think of, are
Mm-hmm.
people really being present in their experience? What are they holding on to? What are they allowing to let go of? And I know that you touch upon that work also within your experiences with college students. So I wanted to give you that space too to talk about that.
Yeah, so let's remember that most of us are part of communities where mental health is still very stigmatized.
Yeah.
So if I said anything like, I want to practice mindfulness to my family, they would look at me like I had three heads,
Yeah.
right? It's just not the norm. Therapy is not the norm within our families. So it's so important for me to always be able to give back. And I became a social worker because of my experience with anxiety as a first gen college student and
Mhm.
wanting and looking for someone that would be able to help me and not finding it right away. I wanted to be that person for someone else. So it's so important that we're teaching this new generation who is a little bit more open-minded, which is
Right.
great, to access these resources that are available to them, what questions to ask, how to get maybe outside of the school support, and just tap into all these little nuances that we have experienced ourselves as students, but kind of putting it at the forefront so that they know what to look out for. So, one of the biggest components that you just mentioned that I touch upon with college students is that lack of sense of belonging,
Mm.
right? We're always looking for belonging, whether we're as a student or a professional. And that's something that can really hinder students from reaching their full academic potential if
Hmm.
they don't feel as though they have a voice or that they belong in the space that they're in. For me, representation is 100% the most important thing. We often don't see ourselves in others, in our role models, in these
Hmm.
authority figures. So again, that was something that was critical for me to be able um, to share as a Latina and as a Latina with a clinical license.
Yeah.
Even though I don't practice therapy, I knew it was always going to be important for me to educate on mental health. And there's so much that goes into it. I don't know if you want to talk about, what are the common things that students go into, but
Yeah, let's do it.
interestingly and interestingly enough, I did do some research on mindfulness practices with first-gen college students. And although it's not where we would want it to be, there is some research that is being conducted for students. So a lot of other challenges that our students go through is a sense of isolation,
Hmm.
a sense of guilt, being the first in their families, a sense of confusion because there's, so much that goes into a college campus that we're not familiar with.
Yeah,
And there's also this transitioning to college piece that nobody talks about. High school and college are two different worlds. So our
completely.
students are going through a lot of mental health challenges. They're at an increased risk for depression, for anxiety compared to non-first gen students. They spend less time socializing with their peers.
Mm,
They might have jobs to be able to support their families. They may have to take care of their younger siblings.
right.
So these are all things that we're starting to see that make it a lot more challenging for a first gen to get support on top of the fact that mental health is still stigmatized, so they can't talk to their families about this.
Yeah,
So
before you go on to the mindfulness piece, I just want
yeah.
to paint a little bit more of a concrete picture for the listener or the viewer who does not identify as first gen, because as you were saying that, it took me back to the College of New Jersey where I went to school. Again, my parents had never been to college, and I found myself on a campus where you knew all the black and brown faces because there weren't that many. So you would kind of nod and say hello
Mm,
because you became familiar with everybody. And
yeah.
imagine yourself if you don't fit, into the definition of first gen of, and it doesn't have to be this definition, but being in a classroom and you're the only one of color. And everybody
Yeah.
else looks very different from you. And your parents have never been to college. So you know what the high school experience is like. But as you stated, it can be very different. And then to keep up with the demand, perhaps coming from an area where you felt like they didn't prepare you well enough for that rigor if you go
Mm-hmm.
to if that is to be your experience. And then what's a sorority, what's a fraternity, what do you do, again, what's a FAFSA, how can I help myself, what are the resources that are available at a college campus in order for me to succeed. I just wanted to put that out there because sometimes if that's not to be our experience, you can be like, well, what's the big deal, right? Like everybody else does it. And yes, everybody, or
Mm-hmm.
not everybody, if you go to college, you go to college, but there's a lot of different layers on top of cultural pressures, on top of expectations and different things. As you said, you have to take care of other people in addition to take care of yourself with no how-to book, and no
Yeah.
experience and family members that haven't done this before. So I just wanted to paint that picture before you go on to tell us about the study having to do with mindfulness.
Yeah, I don't know how I filled out the fast food to this day. I don't know how that worked out. I don't remember
I'm
what I
glad it worked out,
included
but
on
yes.
there. I should not have been the one to fill that out. I was also figuring it out alongside my sister, who's only 2 years younger than me. So
Same.
think about trying to figure something out while also teaching it to somebody at the same time. It can
Right,
get
building
very
the plane while
challenging.
flying it.
Exactly, exactly. So those are, very common experiences for us as first gens. But the research that I did find, and I will be more than happy to share with you if you want to include it in your show notes for others to see, is that especially after the pandemic, there is some research that has been done on how mindfulness or mindful practices can be beneficial for first gen college students. So keep in mind all the challenges that I mentioned, the
Right.
specific challenges that are relevant for us. Now they're starting to see that there is a positive response, right, for mindfulness with college students. they have started to see that, especially after the pandemic, students are experiencing high stress levels, like
Mm,
even more than before. And there are certain meditation practices that are found to be beneficial for college students. And schools are now making it a point and being intentional to bring that into the curriculum and to have specific spaces on campus where students can go and be able to practice that, which is amazing. So overall, some of the positives that I have seen, especially in that article, one, it has improved academic performance, which is just like mind-blowing. It has improved sleep.
yes.
It has improved overall emotional regulation, which we know is super important because that's tied to academic performance.
Hmm.
And the most important one that all schools need to pay attention to is that it is improving retention rates. We want our students to stay in school, right? We
Right.
don't want them to drop out. And I said before that COVID-19 brought a huge influx of dropout rates. So if we can start implementing something as simple, which maybe it's not that simple, but it is for me, as mindfulness, why don't we start doing it across the board on all college campuses? So just from that one article, look at all these positives that have come out of it. And it just says so much of why we need to continue having this conversation and why I'm so grateful for your platform to be able to share that with others to bring awareness.
Yeah, that makes my heart so happy as you were going
Mm-hmm.
down all of those benefits that they've found. And I'm so happy that somebody has really done a study and put it into concrete because we think about these things and different individual people can experience the positives. But when you see it in a study, it changes people's mindset as far as like, oh, maybe there is something to this. And there's something to be
Mm-hmm.
said as far as providing space, let's say for meditation and providing guidance on that, but I also love which is why I'm so passionate with my mindful living framework, that you can do all things mindfully and it improves so many things. Like you were saying, having a certain type of mindset, allowing the what is, allowing yourself to let go of
Mm-hmm.
things that no longer serve you. Giving yourself space to experience gratitude intentionally, not just saying, oh, this was nice, thank you very much, but really intentionally thinking
Mm-hmm.
about all of the silver lining so that the heavy stuff doesn't bring you down so much and that you can persevere. There's so many things there. And I mean, moving your body, sleeping better. Who doesn't want all of these positives? And this, I love that
Mm-hmm.
you shared the college experience there, but it goes beyond that to all aspects of
Yeah.
life and everybody can benefit, not just first gen college students. So another knock on the door for people to come on board with
Yeah,
mindfulness and
yeah.
the mindful living mindset.
Yeah, and it's to me it's a muscle because
Hmm.
we're not taught how to do this. No one ever really showed us how to slow down and how to be mindful. Most of the time, we had the experience of seeing our family members always being on the go, never stopping, never taking breaks. So it is difficult to be able to implement that, especially as a college student. So I would say if I can give any advice is just to
Please.
to practice. Just, there's times, look, I'm a therapist and I gotta, practice myself. There's sometimes I walk my dog and I say, do I need to be on the phone while I walk him?
Right.
Why can't I just be present in the moment? So I have no problem calling myself out sometimes, we have to practice that muscle, but just take the baby steps to try and do it. That's the best advice I can give.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that because it is called a mindfulness practice for a reason. And so
Mm-hmm.
often, especially as people who want to do well, we want to check off the boxes and get 100 on the test. But sometimes, even if you have the awareness that, ooh, I'm not feeling it today, or it's taking me a long time to settle my thoughts, or I don't know why I feel so on the go, even having that awareness of yourself, that in itself is a mindfulness practice. So I always say it's not about
Yeah.
sitting crisscross applesauce and floating away on a cloud and feeling at ease the whole time. If you are aware of how you're feeling and you acknowledge those thoughts and can allow them to be present, you can be mindfully pissed off. You can be practice mindfulness
Yeah,
in a lot of different ways. So I'm so glad
that's
that you
true.
mentioned that it is a practice that we continue
Mm-hmm.
every day and not to get 100, but just to experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I think that's so important, and especially for, again, for first gens to implement that as professionals, to be intentional and take that time out, it is crucial. It can literally make or break your day. And for me, I like to do it in the morning so that I set up my day and I know that my day is going to come with, or is going to start with that intention. So if that's what works for you, there's no cookie cutter approach,
Right.
just like with therapy. Find what works for you. If you have to try out a few things, and God knows I've done that many times to see what works for me, do it. Just find, it's like I use the analogy of Cinderella's shoe. I'm a
Mm,
big Disney fan. So you have to go around with the shoe, right, until the right
try it on.
option fits for you. So that's another piece of advice.
Yes, wonderful. And I love that you shared how you like to start your morning off with setting that intention, because that's something that I do as well. And you shared about bringing it back to you, having the awareness, wanting to slow down, moving out of North Jersey and going to Florida. So all
Mm-hmm.
of that, all of those examples are also part of being present and also living mindfully. What are some other of your favorite ways to practice a mindful living lifestyle?
So one of the things that I could not do in Jersey that I'm definitely implementing more now is going on more walks.
Mm,
And being able to do that, I mean, our summers are pretty intense, but we still get to do that a lot more than the 2 months that we get in
I
Jersey.
can
So,
imagine.
yeah, so going for walks, especially in nature, is something that has been a new practice for me, but it's also something that has been very, life-changing, I would say. And also the biggest thing too that I'm starting to realize that I want to do more of is the mindful breathing.
Mm.
So I went to a retreat last week and we did a lot of breath work. And I started to realize that I've been breathing wrong the entire time. Especially as someone that has anxiety, right? We're always future thinking and our breaths can be a lot more sped up. And that's not how we're supposed to be breathing.
Hmm.
So although I don't practice mind breath work on my own, I am aware of how I'm breathing and when it starts to speed up so that I can slow myself down. And it's so helpful that I can be out more and that I can have a slower pace lifestyle here in Florida. So those are proving to be very interesting for me.
I'm glad that you're taking advantage of it. And
Mhm.
best wishes on your continued work with breath work. It definitely does make a
Yeah.
difference when you're breathing from the diaphragm as opposed to always breathing from the chest and living in that go,
Yes.
go, go, even within your breath. Some of us don't realize what a big, big difference that makes. So I wish you all the
Hmm.
best with that. And Sarah, if
Thank
you could
you.
be remembered for one thing on your time on this earth, what would you want that one
Mm.
thing to be?
Oh, that's a good question. Uh, I think for me, it's all about making a difference, having that light bulb moment or seeing that light bulb moment in someone else.
Mm,
When they start to identify, I am worthy of getting support, I can get connected. And also, the representation piece, like I said, is so important to me. When I encounter someone that needs support that I can speak to in Spanish, and they have that moment that they're like, oh my God, somebody
they get it.
understands me.
Yeah.
I can't, like, I get goosebumps every time. Like that is what's important to me, being able to give back to my community. So if I can even have just one person in the most modest way possible say like, hey, you made a difference or you helped me when I really needed it, that is more than enough for me. I love
Oh,
being able to support others.
so well said. And I know that's already happening because of your platforms in so many different ways and all of the people
Thank
that
you.
you're working with. So please share with us a little bit of how people can find you and how people can work with you.
Yeah, so I am on Instagram and LinkedIn under the First-Gen Madrina and or under Sara Diaz LLC. And basically, if you have a hard time finding me, I am under everything, the First-Gen Madrina. My website is the firstgenmadrina.com. And if you identify with what we talked about, I do have a podcast where I share different experiences of being first gens, where we get into some kind of hot topics, I would say, or controversial ones, especially within our families, but that we need to talk more about. And those are things like boundaries, family expectations, obviously mental health, financial wellness. So all those little nuggets and themes that I didn't really get when I was growing up that I want to be able to share with the world if there's anyone that can relate to it. Those are kind of the topics that I like to talk about on my platform. But thank you so much for giving me the space to share that.
My pleasure. Oh, thank you for having that space on your podcast and for the work that you're doing with colleges, with universities, and with first gen students. I know that they definitely appreciate it, and I appreciate that we have a resource to send people to when they want to work with you. So thank you for all you do and for coming on the Free to Be
Thank
Mindful
you.
podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so thankful to Sara to spend her time and to share her expertise with us, as it's work that truly, really is so needed. As she was talking and sharing examples, I was just thinking about my 18-year-old self going to school, but not just back then, also myself going into education, not knowing how to even what to look for in a contract, and definitely starting my own business. And I even see it in parenting. So, as you reflect on the story that you heard and perhaps your experiences, or maybe you're wondering about other people's experiences, I want that to be the focus of our guided meditation today as we just reflect upon that message. How was it for you when you were growing up and perhaps in your journey now? Or how do you think that other people feel when they have that journey that is true to them? And how can we really bring more awareness, not only to ourselves, having that self awareness, but also that social awareness, so that we can just be more mindful of the way that we interact with other people, perhaps what we offer folks, how we can help, and then turning it inward, being mindful of the way that we speak to ourselves, the way that we treat ourselves, regardless if first gen fits you or not. Are you being kind and compassionate to yourself and treating yourself with grace? Or do you beat yourself up a little bit? Take a few moments today to treat yourself and your neighbors with kindness and with compassion. Imagine having a little bit more of that in the world, how that would definitely change things. I thank you so much for listening. And as always, remember that in a world where you're free to be anything that you want to be, you are always free to be mindful. I hope you enjoyed this week's show. It would mean a ton if you took this moment to review the Free to Be Mindful podcast on the platform you catch your favorite shows. That quick and easy act lets me know what you enjoy, and it helps others find the podcast too. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you can listen along next week. In the meantime, I welcome you to catch me on social media at Counselor V De Jesus. And as always, remember, in a world where you are free to be anything that you want to be, you are always free to be mindful. Catch you next week.